Hello, so this will be the last video for inverse function. So just to recap what we learned in our previous two videos, we learned the definition of inverse function. First of all, we learned what is one-to-one function, and then we learned the definition of inverse function, where we see given y equals function of x, given y equals function of x, then function inverse y equals x. And we also saw the graphical representation of this inverse function, and we basically saw if function 3 equal to 5, then function inverse 5 equal to 3. So it just switch the places. Like for example, if function inverse -1 equal to 7, then function of 7 equal to -1. So and then we have seen inverse function property. So what is the property we have seen? We have seen that given a function of x and function gx, so if composition of function f with function g equals x, and also if composition of function g with function f is also x, then g and f are basically inverse of each other. And we also solve a problem with that to prove two functions are inverse of each other. Okay, so in this case, of course, function of fx and the inverse function I gave, only thing is what we prove both functions are inverse of each other. Now the last thing we have seen in the last video is symmetry property of a function with its inverse function. What we have seen, that the original function function fx and the inverse function are basically what, symmetric about the white line, which is this this line, y equals x. Now to find out this inverse function, what we have done, let's pick any point, and then what we do, we flip basically the x and y to find the mirror image of that point. Okay, so that's how we found inverse function graphically. All right, so that's what we have learned up until our last video. So in this video we are going to try to learn how to find inverse function using equation method. Okay, in addition to the graphical method. So let us dive into. So all right, so let us try to see the procedure to find inverse of a function. So procedure to find inverse of a function, which is f inverse. So what I am going to do, as usual, I am going to write down the procedure on the left hand side. So I'm going to write down the procedure left hand side of this divider, and then on the right hand side I'm going to try to simultaneously solve a problem. So let us see. First of all, I am going to for the example problem, I'm going to try to find inverse of this function. So which function? Given, so I have a function, what is it? Function of x equals 3x minus 4. Okay, now our objective is to find the inverse of this particular function. So let us see step by step. So number one step is replace fx with y. So replace fx with y in the equation. So if I try to follow my number one step, so instead of fx, what I'm going to write, I'm going to write y, and I'm going to keep the other part as it is. So 3x minus 4. So this is step number one. So step number two is interchange x and y. So interchange interchange x and y. So let us see if in the step number 2 I have what, y equals 3x minus 4. So what I am going to do, for y I am going to write x, and in this equation in every place I have x, I'm going to write y. So what I'm going to write, it is going to be 3y minus 4. So this is my step number 2. Now step number 3 is solve for y. So solve for y in the equation. So let us see step number 3. In the step number 3, what I have x equals 3y minus 4. Now what I need to do, from this equation I need to solve for y. So I need to find what is y. So what I am going to do, I am going to keep y in one side, and rest I'm going to put it in the other side. So I have 3y here, and in this side I have x. So this negative 4, if I bring it in this side, it is going to be what, positive 4. So I got 3y equals x plus 4. So if I divide both sides by 3, what I get basically x plus 4 over 3 equals y. Alright, so or in other way I can write what, y equals x plus 4, y equals x plus 4 over 3. So let us see the last step. So number 4 step is replace y with f inverse x. So replace y with what, f inverse x. So for my particular problem, step number 4 is what? Step number 4 is I'm going to replace y with f inverse x, which is equals what, x plus 4 over 3. So this is basically my inverse function. So this is my inverse function for this original function of x equals 3x minus 4. So that's how we basically find inverse of any function. Okay, so I solved one problem, and I'm going to solve also another problem. So let us try to solve another problem. Okay, so let's say I have function of x equals x plus 1 over x minus 2. Okay, of course in this equation x cannot be equal to 2, because if x equal to 2, then the denominator will be 0 and it will be not computable. So in any case, so I was given a function of x which is x plus 1 over x minus 2. Now what is my objective? My objective is find inverse of this function. So find what? Function inverse x. So this is what my objective is, okay, finding inverse of this particular function. So let's follow each step. So what is the first step? Replace fx with y. Okay, so let us replace so number 1 step is what? Replace fx with y. So y equals what? X plus 1 over x minus 2. And then in the second step is what? Interchange x and y. So every place I have y, I am going to write x, and every place where I have x, I'm going to write y. So this will be what? Y plus 1 over y minus 2. Okay, now in the third step, what I need to do? In the third step, I need to solve for y from this equation. So from this equation, I need to find actually what is y. So what I am going to do is for both side, so let me write down my original equation. So what I have x equals y plus 1 over y minus 2. Okay, so this is what I have. So now in this step 3, I need to solve for y. So first of all, I want to eliminate this denominator. So to eliminate this denominator, what I am going to do is for both side, I am going to multiply by a quantity y minus 2. For both side, I'm going to multiply y minus 2. So I am not changing anything. So now if you notice, for this side, this y minus 2 and this y minus 2 cancel each other out. Okay, so what I am left with, x multiplied by y minus 2 equals y plus 1. So let's simplify. What I have here is xy minus 2x equals y plus 1. Okay, remember what I need to solve. I need to solve for y. So as I am going to solve for y, I am going to group together all y in left hand side and all the rest in the right hand side. So let us see. So I am going to keep xy as it is, and this y on the other side, which is positive y. So when it come to this side, it is going to be negative y, and in this side I have negative 2x. So in this side it will be positive 2x, and of course plus 1 is plus 1. So now let's see. So let's take y as a common. So what I have, x minus 1 equals 2x plus 1 over 2x plus 1. Okay, so now so what is going to be my y? So my y will be 2x plus 1 over x minus 1. So this is my step number 3. Okay, now what is step number 4? Step number 4 is replace y with f inverse 1. So f inverse x is going to be what? Equals 2x plus 1. So I wrote it very close. So 2x plus 1 over x minus 1. So this is the inverse of my function. Okay, so this is the inverse of which original function? This is the inverse of my original function. This is the inverse of my original function, this function. Okay, function of x equals x plus 1 over x minus 2. So let me write it down. So my original function was what? Original function was function of x equals what? X plus 1 over x minus 2. So that is my original function, and the inverse of this particular function is this one. Okay, so that is the end of our this particular problem. Now another problem I want you to solve at home, and so let me write down only the problem itself. So what you do, let's say given function of x x equals 1 minus 2x over 1 plus x. So given function of x equals 1 minus 2x over 1 plus x, please make sure at home you try to find out function inverse x for this particular problem. Okay, so that is something going to be helpful maybe for the homework for the exam. Okay, so please do it at home. So now you see we basically solve two problems where we find, given the original function, we are able to find the inverse of any function. Okay, now the last topics for this section is domain and range of any function. So what we want to find? We want to find domain and range. Domain and range of any function. So what function you are talking about? Let's say I have a function of x. So let me use another color. So let's say I have a function of x. Function of x equals x plus 1 over x minus 2. So this is my function, and for this particular function I need to find a domain. So I need to find domain for this function and also range of this function. So that is basically my objective. So objective is finding domain and range of this particular function of x equals x plus 1 over x minus 2. Now to make our life easy, let's look for domain for this function. We know what, that denominator of this function cannot be 0. That means what, x cannot be equal to 2. So in one sentence we can say the domain of this function is what, x cannot be equal to 2. But if we try to write down in our proper mathematical form, that will be what, it is negative infinite to 2 union 2 to positive infinite. So this is the domain of my this given function. Now to find if I want to find range of this function fx, the definition of range is what, the y values of this particular function. Now it is not going to be easy to find from this function. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to find the inverse of this function. So what is the inverse of this function? We already found inverse of this function is what, inverse of this function is function inverse x, which is equals 2x plus 1 over x minus 1. So this is the inverse of my this given function fx. So now what I am going to do is I'm going to try to find domain of this inverse function. Now if I try to find domain of this inverse function, so domain of the inverse function, so I know what, the denominator cannot be 0. So that means what, x cannot be equal to 1. Okay, because if x equal to 1, then my domain, the denominator becomes 0 and my this thing become not computable. So x cannot be equal to 1. So this is my domain of this inverse function. So if I write down in proper mathematical form, it will what, it will be negative infinite to 1 union 1 to positive infinite. Okay, so this is the domain of my inverse function. Now range of my original function is actually domain of my inverse function. So what is going to be the range of my this function? So range of function of x will be basically exactly same as the domain of my inverse function. So this will be negative infinite to 1 union 1 to positive infinite. So this is the range of my original function. So now you can find domain and range for any function. Okay, so that will be basically end of our this section, inverse function. So I will discuss next chapter in the following videos.